the creepiest abandoned places. Guys, okay, I have to tell you something. I've been researching, and there are these places, right? And they're, like, abandoned. But not just regular abandoned, like your grandma's house abandoned. These places are, like, haunted abandoned. Are you brave enough to explore them with me? Imagine walking through a place where the air feels thick with history, and every creak and whisper seems to tell a story of its own. These abandoned places were once bustling with life, but now they stand as silent witnesses to the past. From decaying factories that once roared with machinery to grand mansions that hosted lavish parties, each location has its own eerie tale to tell. The atmosphere is heavy with the weight of forgotten memories, and the shadows seem to move with a life of their own. It's as if the very walls are alive, holding on to the secrets of those who once walked their halls. These places are not just abandoned, they are filled with stories of the past, echoing through the empty halls and desolate landscapes. Okay, so Pripyat, this place is like the definition of creepy. Imagine this, a whole city just completely empty. Like everyone just vanished overnight. That's Pripyat. One day it was a bustling city in Ukraine full of families, kids, normal stuff. The next, it was a ghost town. Why? Chernobyl. Yeah, that Chernobyl. See, Pripyat was like the poster child for the Soviet Union's nuclear power program. They built this whole town just for the workers and their families. There was a cinema, an amusement park, apartments, everything. It was supposed to be this perfect little communist paradise. Then, April 26, 1986 happened. Reactor number 4 at the Chernobyl nuclear power plant decided to, explode. The explosion released this massive cloud of radioactive material into the atmosphere, and Pripyat, being right next door, got hit the hardest. The government, they tried to keep it hush-hush at first, but eventually they had to evacuate everyone, like 49,000 people, gone in a matter of hours. They told them they could come back in a few days. People left their homes, their belongings, everything, thinking they'd be back soon, but the radiation, it was too dangerous. Pripyat became a ghost town, frozen in time. Today, you can actually visit Pripyat. It's like stepping into a time capsule or like a horror movie. The buildings are still standing, but they're decaying, falling apart. There's this eerie silence hanging over everything. You can almost feel the ghosts of the people who lived there, There are pictures of Pripyat from before the disaster, and it looks like such a happy place. People are smiling, kids are playing, it's heartbreaking. And now it's just this empty shell. Pripyat is a stark reminder of the devastating power of nuclear energy and the human cost of technological disasters. It's a place that will stay with you long after you've seen it, a haunting reminder of the fragility of our existence. The haunting scenes of Pripyat tell stories of lives abruptly interrupted. A decaying doll in an abandoned school classroom speaks of children who once played there, their laughter now replaced by silence. Personal belongings left behind in haste, like a family photo on a dusty shelf, remind us of the suddenness of their departure. Each frozen moment in Pripyat is a poignant snapshot of a life left behind, a story waiting to be told. Frozen in time, these locations stand as eerie reminders of what once was, now left to the elements and the passage of time. Let's talk about prisons, you guys. Not just any prison, though. This is Eastern State Penitentiary, and it's basically the granddaddy of all haunted prisons. It's in Philadelphia, and it's old like old. They opened it in 1829, back when they thought the best way to rehabilitate criminals was to, torture them with silence. I'm not even kidding. This place was designed to be like the ultimate punishment. They called it Pennsylvania's system of separate confinement. Basically, they believed that if you cut prisoners off from all human contact, they'd have nothing to do but reflect on their crimes and find God. Or, go completely insane. The prison itself is huge, like a fortress. It has these massive stone walls, these creepy guard towers, and inside it's even worse. The cells, they're tiny, dark, and they were designed to be completely silent. The prisoners ate alone, they exercised alone, they couldn't even see each other. Can you imagine the psychological toll that would take on a person? They say some prisoners would whisper to each other through the pipes, just to hear another human voice. Others, they'd scratch messages on their cell walls, desperate for some kind of connection. It's heartbreaking. And the thing is, Eastern State, it housed some seriously notorious criminals. Al Capone, the gangster, he did time here. They say his cell was actually pretty nice though, like a suite compared to the other cells. Of course, he was Al Capone. but even with the nicer accommodations, Capone couldn't escape the oppressive atmosphere of Eastern State. He claimed he was haunted by the ghost of a rival gangster he'd had killed. The prison finally closed in 1971, but the stories, the legends, they didn't go away. Eastern State Penitentiary is a chilling reminder of a darker time in our history, a time when we believed that cruelty was the answer. The silence in these places was so profound that it drove many prisoners to madness. They reported hearing ghostly whispers, seeing shadowy figures, and feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. The isolation and lack of human contact created an environment where the mind could easily unravel, leading to eerie and terrifying experiences that still haunt the halls of Eastern State Penitentiary to this day. In the silence, one can almost hear the whispers of those who once walked these grounds, now driven mad by the isolation and desolation. Chapter 3. Island of the Dolls, where childhood fears come true. Okay, you guys, this one messes me up. This is the Island of the Dolls, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It's this small island in Mexico, near Mexico City, and it's covered, like literally covered in dolls, but not cute dolls like Barbie dolls or whatever. These are old, decaying, creepy dolls. The story goes that this guy, Don Julian Santana, he lived on the island as a caretaker. One day, he found the body of a little girl who had drowned in the canal. She was clutching a doll. It really messed him up, obviously. So, to honor her memory, and maybe to appease her spirit, he started hanging up dolls. At first, it was just a few, but then it became an obsession. He'd find dolls in the trash, in the canals, wherever he could. He'd hang them from trees, from fences, from the walls of his shack. Over time, the island became this creepy, surreal landscape. The dolls, they started to fall apart. They lost limbs, their eyes fell out, their hair rotted away. It's like something out of a nightmare. People say the dolls are possessed by the spirits of dead children, that their eyes follow you as you walk by. Some people say they hear whispers coming from the dolls, or see them moving their heads. Don Julian, he eventually drowned in the same canal where he found the little girl. The Island of the Dolls is now a tourist attraction, believe it or not. People go there to see the dolls, to take pictures, to feel that sense of unease and dread. Childhood fears often revolve around the unknown, the eerie, and the inexplicable. Abandoned places like the Island of the Dolls bring these fears to life with their unsettling atmospheres and creepy elements. The decaying dolls, the whispers, and the feeling of being watched all contribute to a sense of dread that taps into our deepest childhood terrors. These places bring childhood fears to life, with every shadow and creak of the floorboards telling a story of fear and abandonment. Chapter 4. Hashima Island, the real-life ghost in the shell. You guys, have you ever seen a picture of a place and thought, there's no way that's real? It looks like something out of a dystopian movie? That's Hashima Island. It's this tiny island off the coast of Japan, and it's completely abandoned. But here's the thing, Hashima Island used to be one of the most densely populated places on Earth. See, back in the late 1800s, they discovered coal beneath the island, so naturally they built a coal mine. And then because they needed workers, they built a whole city on the island. They called it Gunkanjima, which means Battleship Island because, well, it kind of looks like a battleship. It's this concrete jungle rising up out of the sea. They had apartment buildings, schools, a hospital, even a cinema. Over 5,000 people lived there at its peak. Can you imagine living your whole life on a tiny island surrounded by nothing but the ocean and the constant reminder of your work? It sounds kind of claustrophobic, right? But then, in the 1970s, the coal industry went bust. Japan started using petroleum instead. And just like that, Hashima Island was obsolete. The company shut down the mine, and the residents were forced to evacuate. They had to leave everything behind, their homes, their belongings, their memories. It was like the island just swallowed them up. Today, Hashima Island is a ghost town. The buildings are still standing, but they're crumbling, decaying. Nature's slowly taking over. Trees are growing through the cracks in the concrete, vines are creeping up the walls. It's like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. Hashima Island is a reminder of the fleeting nature of human progress. One minute we're building cities, the next minute they're abandoned ruins. Visitors to Hashima Island often report an eerie silence, as if the ghosts of the past still linger. The desolate atmosphere is palpable, with the wind howling through empty buildings and the distant sound of waves crashing against the shore. It's a haunting reminder of a once thriving community now lost to time. In these ghostly shells of buildings, one can feel the presence of those who once lived here. their spirits lingering in the air. Chapter 5. Poveglia Island, Quarantine Zone of the Damned. Okay, you guys, buckle up, because this one is seriously messed up. This is Poveglia Island, and it's considered one of the most haunted places in the world. And for good reason. It's located in Italy, right near Venice, and it has this dark, twisted history that will chill you to the bone. Poveglia has been a place of death and despair for centuries. Back in the 14th century, during the Black Death, they used it as a quarantine zone. Can you imagine? They shipped people dying from the plague to this island and just left them there to die. Thousands upon thousands of bodies were burned or buried in mass graves on that tiny island. But it gets worse. In the 18th century, they used it as a quarantine zone again. This time for people with the bubonic plague. More death, more suffering, more bodies piled up on the island. The soil of Poveglia is said to be composed of 50% human ash. Let that sink in for a minute. As if that wasn't bad enough, in the early 1900s they built a mental asylum on the island. And this is where the stories get really creepy. They say the doctors at the asylum were cruel, that they experimented on the patients. There are stories of lobotomies, electroshock therapy, all sorts of horrific procedures. And then there's the story of the doctor who went mad. He supposedly tortured and killed some of the patients before throwing himself from the island's bell tower. Some say he was driven mad by the ghosts of the island, that they drove him to commit those atrocities. The asylum was eventually shut down, and Poveglia was abandoned once again. The Italian government declared it off-limits, a danger to the public, and it's been that way ever since. The chilling stories of the damned who were quarantined here are endless. From the cries of plague victims echoing through the night to the ghostly apparitions of tortured souls, Poveglia Island remains a haunting reminder of the past. The quarantine zones are filled with a chilling sense of dread, as if the very air is thick with the memories of those who suffered here. Outro. I'm never sleeping again. Oh my god, you guys, I am shook. Like, seriously, I don't think I can ever sleep again after researching all of that. The dolls, the prisons, the plague islands. It's just too much. I need a hug, or like 20. But seriously, those places are so fascinating, even though they're totally terrifying. Let me know in the comments which place freaked you out the most, and if you'd ever be brave enough to visit any of them. I'm good just watching from the safety of my bed. Thank you very much. There's something deeply unsettling about these places. The eerie silence, the decaying structures, and the haunting histories all combine to create an atmosphere that chills you to the bone. It's as if the very walls whisper tales of sorrow and despair, making you question every creak and shadow. This is why I don't think I'll ever sleep soundly again. After seeing these places, one might find it hard to sleep, haunted by the images of these abandoned and eerie locations.